Hello everyone and welcome back to another Essential Album video. We're now on week 13 and this week we're taking a look at Headhunters by Herbie Hancock. First released October 26th, 1973. Some notable tracks on this album include Chameleon, Watermelon Man, Sly, and Vein Melter. Have some notes here about the album. We're going to get to those. This is just a classic kind of jazz fusion, jazz funk album. Really there's like a lot of good like synthesizer use here. Kind of definitely not a traditional jazz album in any kind of way, really. I think though less experimental than some of the stuff prior to this. I have a quote from him once we get to our notes that we'll get to describing this, but it kind of is like more like jazz fusion and jazz funk than traditional jazz. I know basically I first probably heard Herbie Hancock. I think it was in Grand Theft Auto Vice City? I think Rocket was on that one, and that one was him. That was in the '80s, and doing more kind of like experimentation with like turntables and things like that. So he always has kind of had these albums where he goes in a different direction than the traditional kind of jazz, even some of the more kind of like avant-garde or experimental albums that predated this one were not really traditional jazz albums either. But let me get to our notes and then we'll get to the track listing and everything like that. So we just pull this out here. There we go. So again, like we mentioned earlier, first released October 26th, 1973. The albums that predated this one, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this first one correctly, were Mondishi, Crossing, and Sextant. Those are, so this is I think his 12th album, Headhunters, and then the other albums were 9, 10, and 11. And according to my research, those are a little bit more avant-garde, a little bit more experimental. I have a quote here from Herbie Hancock about kind of the thought process going into when they were working on this album here. So this is a quote from Herbie Hancock, and this is actually from a note that was included, or like was like in like the little like CD booklet in the 1997 reissue of this on CD. So the quote was, quote, "I began to feel that I had been spending so much time exploring the upper atmosphere of music and the more ethereal kind of far-out spacey stuff. Now there was this need to take some more of the earth and to feel a little more tethered, a connection to the earth. I was beginning to feel that we, the Sextet, the band, were playing this heavy kind of music, and I was tired of everything being heavy. I wanted to play something lighter." And again, that is from the reissue, like liner notes from the reissue for the 1997 CD. So have that was the quote there. Next up, they formed a new band for this album. I think they only retained one member of his previous band, but the album is called Headhunters, and the band that they formed to perform this album, record it, were called the Headhunters as well. Benny Maupin, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, was the only member of the band that was kind of like in the previous. So he's basically the only kind of holdover member. Obviously, Herbie Hancock was in that band as well, but they formed a new band for this, and Benny Maupin was the only one that remained basically. This was, at least for a few years, the best-selling jazz album of that time period. So it came out in 1973, and it got surpassed eventually by George Benson's Breezin', which came out a few years later in 1976. So basically, the best-selling jazz album for like roughly like a 3-year period, which is pretty impressive. And again, like I said, George Benson's album came out in 1976. This album ended up appealing to a wider audience than just jazz fans. So like jazz people were obviously on board with it just being a Herbie Hancock record, but then it appealed more to like the funk crowd, more to the R&B crowd. So kind of expanded the scope of the album and got a wider audience as part of that. It peaked at number 13 on the Billboard 200. And now we're going to jump into some of the reviews and scores for the album before we get to the track list. So these are all just the reviews, and pretty amazing reviews across the board here. AllMusic has it at a 5 out of 5. Downbeat has it again at a 5 out of 5. Jazzwise, a 5 out of 5 again. Let's see here. Penguin Guide to Jazz Recordings has it at a 4 out of 4. Pitchfork has it at a 10 out of 10. I actually looked at that Pitchfork review earlier, and that was a more like a retrospective review. I think that review was from 2020, but still a 10 out of 10 from Pitchfork is pretty impressive. Q has it at a 4 out of 5. Rolling Stone Album Guide has it, looks like, at a 3.5 out of 5, it looks like. Rolling Stone Jazz Record Guide has it at a 3 out of 5, and Uncut has it at a 4 out of 5. So overall, pretty good reviews. It's kind of gone on as being kind of this just iconic jazz record, and definitely like one of, I think, Herbie Hancock's best albums. The only album I think of his I have on vinyl, I think it's Future Shock, I think. So I've got that used several years ago. That's also a very good one, and that was kind of like Rocket was the first song I had listened to from him before kind of getting more into jazz music. Because I wouldn't necessarily call Rocket a jazz song. It's more almost like hip hop, but some of those elements are kind of here as well. Because I think it actually charted on some hip hop. This album actually charted on some hip hop charts as well. So the charting, yeah, so like it peaked at number 13 on the Billboard 200, and then got to number 2 on the R&B hip hop album guide from, or not guide, the top R&B hip hop albums from Billboard. So I don't know if they just merged those, because hip hop I think was still emerging at the time. Let me see here. I don't know when this hip hop chart actually started. Oh, I guess it was R&B at the time. So basically, that chart started in 1965 as the hot R&B, and then of course has expanded to include hip hop and other genres as well. So getting to that, basically number 2 on the kind of R&B chart. There are R&B elements in this, and I think there was one bit of my research coming across this where it said it made jazz fans into R&B fans. It made R&B fans into jazz fans. So kind of, like I said, that kind of related to that, attracting or appealing to a wider audience. We're now going to get to the track list here. This isn't a terribly long record. It comes in at about, let me see, like 40 minutes or so. 41 minutes and 52 seconds. And we basically already listed all the songs on the album off earlier. It's only actually four tracks. They're a little bit longer, as like some jazz songs are. So track 1 is Chameleon. That comes in at about 15 minutes and 41 seconds. Track 2 is Watermelon Man at 6 minutes and 29 seconds. Track 3 is Sly, which is 10 minutes and 15 seconds. And then track 4 is Vein Melter, which is 9 minutes and 9 seconds. Track 3, which is Sly, was written for Sly Stone, obviously from Sly and the Family Stone. I think Watermelon Man was actually the only song on the album that wasn't written specifically for the album. From what I was reading, I think Herbie Hancock had like recorded some of it earlier, or had written some of it earlier, and then they reworked the song to fit on this album. So Watermelon Man was kind of like somewhat pre-existing before this album was recorded. They kind of slotted it in, probably changed it up a little bit to kind of fit the tone of the album. But yeah, this is like I said earlier, this is just an excellent like funk jazz fusion album. Like I said, one of my favorite Herbie Hancock records, and definitely goes to show that just like when he wants to do something different, he goes out of his way to do different stuff instead of just always being like traditional jazz. You have him, like pulling in elements of funk into this record, like a little bit of R&B as well. And then on like Future Shock, you have him pulling in doing like things with turntables and record scratching and things like that. So this is just an excellent album. Highly recommend checking it out. And that is going to do it for this week's video. We'll be back again in a week from now with a whole new album, or whole new essential album, I should say. No idea what that album is going to be just yet, but we'll be back in a week with that. So remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.